What if I told you that in the harsh conditions of the Wild West, the ground beneath your feet killed faster than an enemy bullet or arrow? Many modern tourists and survival enthusiasts make the fatal mistake of thinking that the most important thing is to shelter from the wind and snow above. The indigenous peoples of North America knew this harsh truth hundreds of years before the advent of modern physics and thermodynamics. For them, contact between the body and the cold ground meant certain death from hypothermia, even if the air around them was relatively warm. The wisdom of generations who lived on the Great Plains dictated strict rules for setting up camp, which could not be broken under any circumstances. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Crow Indians created a unique sleeping system that turned their dwellings into impregnable fortresses of warmth. This was not just a tradition, but a complex survival technology honed over centuries of harsh winters. Watch the video to the end to find out how simple grass saved fingers from amputation and why Native Americans never slept with their heads facing the fire. What if I told you that everything you believed about cold weather is wrong and that the main source of danger is not in the air? The Earth has enormous heat capacity and the ability to draw heat from any object that comes into contact with it. For a person lying on the ground without insulation, the soil becomes an endless reservoir of cold that cannot be warmed by the heat of their own body. The thermal conductivity of the Earth is dozens of times higher than that of still air, making direct contact deadly dangerous. Even the warmest fur coat loses its properties when compressed by body weight on icy ground. Native Americans understood this principle intuitively by observing the behavior of animals in the wild. They saw that even bison, with their thick hides, tried not to lie on bare snow or frozen ground for long periods of time. This experience was passed down from elders to young hunters as the first and foremost law of survival on the prairie. Violating this rule led to serious kidney, lung, and joint diseases, which in the absence of medicine were a death sentence. Sleeping on the ground meant voluntarily giving away one's life energy to the cold abyss beneath. Therefore, the entire culture of nomadic peoples was built around creating reliable barriers between humans and the ground. This invisible process of heat loss begins imperceptibly when a person simply feels a slight chill in their back or side. Gradually, the cold penetrates deeper, slowing down blood circulation and lowering the overall body temperature of the sleeper. A person may not even wake up, falling into a sleep that turns into hypothermic coma. Native Americans called the cold of the earth the silent thief of souls that comes from below. That is why preparing a place to sleep took more time than setting up the dwelling itself. Unlike European settlers, who often relied on blankets and fires, Native Americans did things differently. They knew that a fire only warms the side facing it, while the ground is constantly freezing. The struggle was for every degree of heat retained inside the dwelling and inside clothing. It was a competition of endurance between human ingenuity and the ruthless laws of physics. Their arsenal did not include synthetic mats or inflatable mattresses, only what nature provided. Insulation materials were collected in advance, before the onset of deep snow and severe frosts. Experienced women of the tribe knew the best places where suitable shrubs and grasses grew. The preparation of these materials was an important part of seasonal work, in which many members of the community participated. The quality of the branches and skins collected determined whether a family would survive the coming winter. No one took this lightly, as the price of a mistake was too high. Even during short breaks, hunters never sat directly on the ground or rocks. They always placed a piece of skin, a bunch of grass, or branches under themselves. This habit became automatic and continued throughout a person's life. It was not just a matter of comfort, but a matter of preserving the warrior's combat effectiveness and health. Ignoring this rule was considered a sign of inexperience and stupidity. Creating reliable protection required an understanding of the properties of various natural materials. Some materials were better at trapping air, others were stronger, and still others repelled moisture. The combination of these properties made it possible to create multi-layered structures that surpassed many modern counterparts. Each layer performed its specific function in the overall thermoregulation system. It was a true engineering approach to creating a sleeping place. There were many nuances depending on the specific terrain and season. Some methods were used on marshy soils, while completely different ones were used on rocky plateaus. Tribes adapted their technologies to the environment in which they roamed. But one principle remained unchanged: never touch the ground with your body. This law was written by the lives of those who broke it. It would be very interesting to hear your opinion on such harsh rules of survival. What do you think? Could modern tourists survive with such knowledge without their equipment? Write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next analysis of historical facts. Want to learn a secret that will change your life and your idea of comfort in the wild? The basis of the sleeping place for the tribes of the Great Plains, such as the Lakota and Blackfoot, was a special structure made of willow rods. It was not just a pile of branches thrown together, but a complex and skillfully made product. Thin, straight red willow shoots collected from riverbanks were used to make it. Willow was chosen for a reason. It was elastic, durable, and became very light when dried. The leaves were removed from the rods, but the bark was often left on to prevent the skins laid on top from slipping. Each rod was selected for its thickness to create a smooth surface without bumps or pits. Then they were tied together with bison tendons at a certain distance from each other. The result was a kind of mat that could be rolled up for transport. This design resembled modern slatted bed bases. The main purpose of such a willow mat was to create an air gap between the ground and the sleeper. The rods lifted the bed above the cold surface, allowing air to circulate underneath. This prevented the accumulation of moisture and condensation, which would inevitably occur with direct contact. Air is known to be one of the best heat insulators in nature. Thus, the wicker bed worked like a thermos, retaining body heat. In addition, this design had excellent shock-absorbing properties. The rods sprang under the weight of a person, creating an orthopedic effect and supporting the back. This was critically important for proper rest after a hard day of traveling or hunting. Sleeping on hard ground did not allow the muscles to relax, and a willow bed solved this problem. Comfort was the key to restoring a warrior's strength. The ends of the mat were often raised on both sides and secured to low wooden tripods. This created a headboard and footboard, turning the mat into a kind of cradle or sofa. During the day, this structure was used as a comfortable seat with a sloping backrest for resting. This saved space in the teepee and made the interior more functional. Things could be stored under the raised edge of the bed. The size of the mat strictly corresponded to the height of the person for whom it was intended. The women of the tribe spent many hours creating such beds, decorating them with geometric patterns made of painted tendons. It was a source of pride for the hostess and an indicator of the family's wealth. A good willow bed could last for years if properly cared for. It was protected from dampness and periodically dried in the sun. In winter, the space under the willow lattice was filled with dry grass or moss for additional warmth. This created another barrier against the cold coming from the frozen ground. The grass, sandwiched between the ground and the wicker, did not clump together and retained its volume. Such a pillow reliably insulated the sleeping area even in the most severe frosts. The system was modular and easily adapted to the weather. For nomads, the mobility of all their belongings, including furniture, was also important. A willow mat could be rolled up in seconds and tied to a sled or saddle. It was light, compact, and did not take up much space when moving camp. This distinguished it favorably from the bulky European furniture of the time. Indians valued things that combined functionality and portability. Such structures were used not only for sleeping, but also as a basis for sitting during councils. Elders sat on such platforms covered with the best skins, emphasizing their status. Respect for the earth was manifested in not touching it unnecessarily. This was part of the general culture and etiquette of the Plains peoples. The uniqueness of this technology lay in the use of the simplest materials to solve a complex problem. Willow grew everywhere. Tendons were obtained while hunting, and the result exceeded all expectations. Why do you think red willow became the main material for these beds, rather than other types of wood? In the next chapter, you will learn about a material that was more valuable than gold in the winter steppe. What I am about to show you is prohibited in 12 countries when it comes to modern trade. But back then, it was the basis of life. Several layers of specially tanned bison hides were always laid on top of the willow mat. Bison hide is a unique, natural material with unparalleled thermal insulation properties. Bison winter wool is thick, curly, and has a dense undercoat that retains warm air perfectly. Even in the strongest blizzards, bison stand motionless, and the snow on their backs does not melt, which indicates perfect insulation. The process of tanning such skins for sleeping was different from tanning leather for clothing or tipi. Skins intended for bedding were left with fur, and efforts were made to preserve its maximum thickness. The leather layer was treated with a mixture of animal liver and brain to make it soft and elastic. It was a laborious process that took several days of hard work. The result was a huge, warm, and soft duvet. Usually several skins were used. One was laid with the fur facing up to create a soft surface. Another could be placed with the fur facing down or used as a blanket, covering oneself with it. The weight of the bison hide played a positive role. It fit snugly around the body, leaving no gaps for cold air to enter. Under such a blanket, a microclimate was created in which a person quickly warmed up with their own body heat. The weight of the hide gave a feeling of security and peace. Bison wool has the ability to absorb moisture while remaining dry to the touch. This was critically important as people inevitably sweat during sleep. Ordinary fabrics get wet and begin to cool the body, but bison fur wicks away moisture. This prevented hypothermia in the morning when the air temperature in the teepee dropped. Sleep hygiene was maintained by the natural properties of the material. Old, worn-out skins were not thrown away, but used as the bottom layer, laid directly on willow rods. They served as an additional layer, protecting new, more valuable skins from abrasion. This multi-layered approach allowed the thickness of the bedding to be adjusted depending on the season. In summer, the number of layers was reduced, and in winter, it was increased to the maximum. Hides obtained in late autumn or early winter, when the animal's fur was thickest, were particularly prized. Hunters specifically chose the time to hunt bedding bison. The male's skin was larger and heavier and was often used as a mattress. The female skins were softer and lighter and were better suited as blankets. Each family member had their own set. Unlike modern sleeping bags, bison robes could be easily dried by the fire. If the fur got wet, it was simply shaken out and hung on a crossbar inside the teepee. The durability of the fur allowed one skin to be used for many years. It was passed down from older to younger members of the family or served as a spare for guests. It was an investment of labor in future warmth. The aroma of tanned leather and campfire smoke, which permeated the skins, was the smell of home for the Native Americans. This smell repelled some insects and created a cozy atmosphere. Sleeping in such a bed was not only warm, but also psychologically comfortable. The feeling of unity with nature and the hunted animal accompanied a person even in their sleep. The best but not too bulky skins were chosen for travel. When hiking, when it was not possible to carry willow beds, the skins were laid on pine branches or dry grass. But even in the field, the principle of insulation from the ground was strictly observed. A bison robe was a universal item, a cloak during the day and a bed at night. Without bison, survival on the plains would have been impossible, and their hides literally saved lives every night. This resource was the basis of the economy and daily life of the indigenous peoples of the prairies. Want to learn a secret that will change your life if you love hiking? Don't forget to like this video if you found the information useful. Are you ready to learn the truth about how heating actually worked in an Indian dwelling? The secret to warmth lay not only in the bed itself, but also in the design of the teepee, which protected the sleeping area from drafts. Inside the teepee, a special inner lining called an ozon, or rosa, was stretched around the entire perimeter. This strip of leather or fabric, about 5 feet high, was attached to poles and hung down to the ground. The bottom edge of the teepee's outer covering usually did not touch the ground tightly, leaving a gap for fresh air to flow in. This cold air was necessary to maintain the draft of the fire, so that the smoke would escape through the smoke hole. But if it weren't for the inner lining, this cold draft would blow directly on the sleeping people. The ozon created a barrier, directing the cold air upward along the walls of the teepee to the smoke vent. This created an air gap between the outer wall of the teepee and the inner lining. This gap acted as an excellent insulator, similar to the principle of double glazing in modern windows. Inside the living space, separated by the ozon, the air remained still and warm. The sleeping areas were located behind this inner wall, in the zone of thermal comfort. The inner lining also protected against condensation that could drip from the upper parts of the teepee. Water droplets flowed down the ozon to the ground, bypassing the beds and belongings of the inhabitants. This allowed the interior of the dwelling to remain dry even during prolonged rains. Dryness was synonymous with warmth, and the Indians protected their dwellings from moisture by any means possible. In addition, the ozon was often decorated with drawings depicting the exploits of warriors or family history. It created comfort and visually limited personal space in the round room. This made the teepee not just a tent, but a real home with wallpaper and walls. Psychologically, this created a feeling of protection from the outside world. The sleeping places were arranged in a circle along the walls, leaving the center free for the hearth. This layout was dictated by the shape of the room and the distribution of heat. The heat from the fire spread radially, evenly warming all those sleeping. At the same time, no one was too close to the fire to be burned by sparks. The floor inside the teepee, not occupied by beds, was often covered with sage or wormwood branches. These plants not only served as additional insulation, but also aromatized the air. The pleasant smell of herbs overpowered the smells of smoke and dampness, creating a healthy atmosphere. Sage was also considered a sacred plant that cleansed the space of evil spirits. The entrance to the teepee was always oriented to the east, towards the rising sun and prevailing winds. This helped protect the entrance from snow and cold air. The correct orientation of the dwelling was the first step in the heat conservation system. Knowledge of the windrows was essential for anyone setting up camp. In winter, the bottom of the teepee could be additionally covered with snow or turf on the outside for airtightness. This turned a light tent into a semi-dugout with thick walls. Snow is known to be an excellent heat insulator, and the Indians used its properties to their advantage. Inside such a structure, the temperature could be 20 to 30 degrees higher than outside. Thus, the sleeping area was part of a single complex life support system. It was not enough to simply throw a skin on the ground and wait for warmth. It was necessary to control the air currents. Do you think the principle of double walls can be applied to modern tourist tents? In the next chapter, you will learn why Native Americans never took off their clothes at night. Contrary to popular belief, Native Americans did not strip naked before going to sleep on the coldest nights. The concept of pajamas or special clothing for sleeping was foreign to them in the conditions of a winter hike. They slept in the same clothes they wore during the day, especially if they were made of soft, tan suede. Layered clothing was itself part of a sleeping system that retained body heat. The basis of their wardrobe consisted of loincloths, leggings, and shirts made of deerskin. Deerskin has excellent breathability, preventing the body from overheating and sweating. This was important because damp underwear becomes an ice pack in the cold. Sleeping in dry suede was comfortable and safe for health. Special attention was paid to the feet, as the limbs freeze first. Moccasins were usually not taken off at night if they were dry. If the shoes got wet during the day, they were dried by the fire, and a spare pair was worn at night. Sleeping barefoot in severe frost in a drafty teepee was an unjustified risk. For extra warmth, moccasins were stuffed with soft, dry grass or bison wool. This natural insulation created an air cushion around the foot. The grass absorbed excess moisture and retained heat better than any woolen sock. In the morning, the used grass was simply shaken out and replaced with fresh grass. It was a simple, hygienic, and free way to keep your feet warm. In severe cold, they used fur capes and hoods, which they did not take off even while sleeping. The head is an area of enormous heat loss, and protecting it was a priority. Women wrapped themselves in large shawls, while men pulled hoods made of wolf or coyote skins over their heads. The fur of predators near the face created a warm microclimate for breathing. If clothes were wet from snow or sweat, they still had to be taken off. Clothes were dried on crossbars over the fire while people slept, wrapped in bison robes. Putting on warm clothes that had dried by the fire in the morning was one of the small pleasures of a harsh life. Experienced warriors knew how to dry their clothes on themselves without getting cold, but this required skill. Belts and bandages were loosened at night so as not to interfere with blood circulation. Tight clothing during sleep could lead to numbness in the limbs and rapid freezing. Free blood circulation is the body's main internal heater. The Indians knew anatomy and physiology very well, taking care of their bodies. Children slept in special fur bags that restricted their movements and prevented them from uncovering themselves during sleep. These were the prototypes of modern baby sleeping bags. Infants were swaddled in soft suede and laid on dry moss, which served as a diaper and insulation. Keeping children warm was the main responsibility of mothers. This approach to sleepwear ensured constant readiness for action. In the event of a sudden enemy attack or the appearance of a predator, a warrior could jump up and engage in battle instantly. There was no need to waste precious seconds getting dressed or looking for shoes. Life at war required being fully armed even in the world of dreams. Clothing was a second skin, protection, and a home for a person on the endless plains. It was not divided into day and night wear. It was a constant shell of survival. Want to know a secret that will change your life and your relationships with loved ones in extreme situations? The Indians knew that the most effective source of heat is another person. Therefore, sleeping places in the teepee were not arranged randomly, but according to a strict pattern that ensured mutual warming. In winter, when the frost reached critical levels, individualism gave way to collective survival. Family members slept in tight groups, huddling together with their backs pressed against each other. Usually, sleeping places were arranged in a circle with feet toward the center, where the hearth burned. This arrangement was called a wheel and was the most rational from a physical standpoint. The feet, which freeze the fastest, were closest to the heat source. The heads were in the cool zone near the walls, which provided fresh air for breathing. The most vulnerable members of the tribe, children and the elderly, were always placed in the center of the composition. They were laid between healthy adult men and women who shielded them from the cold with their bodies. The human body gives off about as much heat as a 60-watt incandescent light bulb. A group of 5 people is already a powerful 300-watt heater. Married couples slept together under one large bison skin. This saved resources and retained heat more efficiently. Single warriors often paired up or formed groups of 3 to sleep on cold nights. Pride and the desire for personal space gave way to the need to survive until dawn. This strengthened social bonds within the group. There was a strict rule: never lie with your head toward the fire. This was explained not only by the risk of hair catching fire, but also by physiology. Overheating the head causes headaches and discomfort, while the feet remain cold. The correct temperature gradient, feet warm, head cold, was the law of healthy sleep. Dogs, which were an integral part of the camp, also participated in this heating system. On particularly cold nights, they were allowed into the teepee and lay down at people's feet or along their backs. Dogs have a higher body temperature than humans, which made them excellent living hot water bottles. This proximity was mutually beneficial. People warmed the dogs and dogs warmed the people. The compact arrangement of people reduced the amount of air that needed to be warmed by their bodies under the blankets. The less empty space under the skin, the warmer it was inside. The Indians instinctively minimized the surface area of heat transfer. This is the principle that penguins use in Antarctica, huddling together in dense groups. In the morning, when the fire in the hearth burned out, it was the warmth of their bodies that allowed them to hold out until the person on duty woke up and threw more wood on the fire. Collective sleeping was not just a habit, but an energy-saving strategy. A lone individual in the winter steppe had much less chance of survival. This tradition of sleeping together created a special sense of unity and security. Everyone knew that their back was covered and warmed by a relative. This reduced stress levels and allowed them to sleep more soundly, restoring their strength. In modern culture, we are used to separate rooms and large beds. But in extreme conditions, the old methods work best. Do you think you could sleep in a pile with 10 relatives for warmth? In the next chapter, you will learn how snow turned from an enemy into a friend. The peoples who lived north of the Great Plains and those who encountered deep snow used another amazing resource. Snow, which many associate with cold, is actually an excellent insulator. It consists of many ice crystals and air trapped between them. If used correctly, snow can become a warm blanket. When hiking, when there was no time to set up a tipi, warriors dug a trench or pit in a deep snowdrift. The bottom of this pit was lined with a thick layer of spruce branches. The spruce branches not only insulated from the snow, but also created a springy mattress. The pit was covered with skins or a canopy of branches, which was then covered with snow. In such a snow shelter, the temperature rarely dropped below 0 degrees, even if it was 40 degrees below zero outside. The walls of snow did not let the wind through and retain the heat emanating from the person. It was the same principle as the Eskimo igloo. The main thing was to prevent the snow from melting through direct contact with the body or clothing. Sometimes, if the snow was not deep, it was simply raked into a mound around the sleeping area, creating a windbreak. This protected against the most formidable enemy in the steppe, the icy wind that instantly blows the warmth out of clothing. The wall of snow functioned as an aerodynamic screen. Interestingly, sleeping on deep compacted snow, through a layer of pine branches and skins, was often warmer than on frozen bare ground. The ground is a monolith that draws heat endlessly. Snow, on the other hand, is porous and has low thermal conductivity. Choosing a place to spend the night required a deep understanding of the properties of different surfaces. Hunters in subarctic regions, such as the Cree and Athabascan peoples, taught their southern neighbors the art of building quincies, temporary snow huts. To do this, they raked up a large pile of snow, let it freeze, and then dug out a cavity inside. In such a house, it was possible to survive the most terrible storm with only a single skin and a small candle. The pine branches used as bedding were laid in a special way, like tiles. The branches were stuck into the snow at an angle so that each subsequent one overlapped the trunk of the previous one. The result was a thick, soft, and fragrant carpet that completely blocked the cold from below. The thickness of such a layer could reach half a meter. Clothes and shoes were carefully cleaned of stuck snow before entering the snow shelter. If snow was brought inside, it would melt, wet things, and then freeze again, turning clothes into an icy shell. Special scrapers made of bone or wood were an important piece of equipment. This ability to use the hostile environment to their advantage distinguished survival experts from novices. Instead of fighting the snow, the Indians made it their ally. Nature provided everything they needed. They just had to know how to take it. Knowledge of the properties of snow saved more than one group caught in a sudden blizzard far from their main camp. It was extreme architecture, built in an hour and saving lives throughout the night. While the nomadic tribes of the Great Plains lived in portable tipis, their eastern neighbors solved the housing problem in a completely different way. The Iroquois and Huron peoples also faced the problem of frozen ground, but chose a sedentary lifestyle. They built huge permanent dwellings known as longhouses, in which dozens of related families lived under one roof. Their approach to sleeping arrangements was radically different from that of the nomads, but it pursued the same main goal. The main task remained the same: to get away from the cold ground at all costs. Wide and sturdy wooden platforms were built along the entire length of the walls in the longhouses. These massive bunks were raised half a meter or even a meter above the earthen floor. This architectural solution created the necessary physical barrier between the sleeping person and the ground. These bunks served as the main universal place for living. People slept here at night, sat here to work during the day, and stored their personal belongings here. The space formed under the platform acted as a natural air insulator. The inhabitants of the house understood the physics of heat perfectly. Cold air is always heavier than warm air. Therefore, the coldest drafts always accumulated at the bottom, spreading across the earthen floor like an invisible river. The people sleeping on the raised platform remained in the warmer air rising from the hearths. They literally hovered above the layer of cold, preserving their health and energy. The platforms themselves were sturdy and reliable, made of thick poles. The base was covered with large sheets of straightened elm bark or woven mats made of river reeds. Elm bark was an excellent and affordable building material for this purpose. It could be rolled out into large, flat, and durable sheets resembling modern plywood. The bark was strong enough to support the weight of several people, and at the same time, provided good insulation from drafts from below. On top of this hard base, women laid soft bear or deer skins. This created a multi-layered mattress that ensured a comfortable night's sleep. The empty space under the bunks was never wasted and was used to store dry supplies. Families kept stacks of dry firewood and baskets of corn and pumpkins there. The firewood, lying in a thick layer directly under the sleeping person, served an additional useful function. Dry wood absorbed excess moisture from the air and created another layer of insulation from the ground. It was an amazingly rational system for using every cubic meter of living space. The house was filled with supplies that helped to insulate it. Sometimes during particularly severe and bitter frosts, dangerous but effective methods of additional heating were used. Clay pots with smoldering coals could be carefully placed under the high platforms. This created a primitive effect of underfloor heating, which modern residents dream of. Soft heat rose from below, passing through the bark and skins, warming the bed from the inside. However, this was done with extreme caution and under supervision so as not to cause a fire. A spark in a dry wooden structure could lead to tragedy in a matter of minutes. The walls of longhouses were also carefully insulated with layers of bark and moss, but it was the raised sleeping area that was the main factor in comfort. The earthen floor in a longhouse was trampled by hundreds of feet until it was as hard as stone. In winter, it became literally icy, and no one in their right mind would lie down on it to sleep, lest they catch a cold. There was also a second upper tier of shelves located above the sleeping platforms. It was usually used to store household utensils and supplies, but people could also sleep there. Most often, these were young, hardy warriors who did not get a place below. There under the roof itself, it was warmest due to the heat rising from the fires. However, it was also much smokier there, as the smoke escaped through holes in the roof. Therefore, these were places of a kind of economy class where one had to endure acrid smoke for the sake of warmth. The most comfortable and prestigious places were always on the middle platforms. These architectural solutions clearly show that different tribes came to the same correct conclusions in different ways. The main enemy of a sleeping person is always the cold, heat-absorbing earth. Whether it was a willow bed in a teepee in the west or wooden bunks in a longhouse in the east, the principle was the same. Breaking direct contact with the ground was the key to survival in winter. The culture of sleeping on raised platforms also effectively protected people from rodents and small pests. Mice, which often ran across the floor in search of food, could not easily reach those who were sleeping. It was not only a question of keeping warm, but also of basic hygiene and peace of mind. The Iroquois essentially created a prototype of an apartment building with built-in furniture. Their centuries-old experience proves how important a well-thought-out domestic infrastructure is. Even with strong walls and a reliable roof, it would be extremely difficult to survive the winter without a properly organized sleeping area. Personal comfort technologies kept pace and developed in parallel with construction technologies. Waking up in a winter camp was always a moment of truth for every Native American. It was those first few seconds after sleep that showed how well a person had prepared for the night. If all the harsh rules of survival had been followed, the warrior would wake up alert, fully rested, and ready for hard work. But if even the slightest mistake or carelessness was made somewhere, the consequences were immediate. A skin that had slipped off during sleep, slightly damp grass insulation in moccasins, or accidental contact with the icy ground led to instant retribution. Morning stiffness in the joints and aching in the body were the first warning signs of hypothermia. The Indians knew for sure that cold has a way of building up and literally getting into your bones. Chronic, painful backaches and severe arthritis were common companions for those who neglected the quality of their bedding in their youth. The cold didn't forgive mistakes and always made you pay for them years later. The elders of the tribe often suffered visibly from the consequences of sleeping on damp ground in their carefree youth. Therefore, young people were diligently taught from the mistakes of others, without waiting for their own. They were shown the crooked fingers and sore, inflexible knees of veterans as a living reminder of the importance of warmth. Every person's morning began with a mandatory check of the sensitivity of all limbs. It was a ritual of self-diagnosis that was performed even before getting out of bed. If the toes lost sensitivity or felt wooden, it was a warning sign. They immediately began to rub them vigorously with dry snow or coarse dry wool to restore blood flow. At the same time, there was a strict prohibition that even children knew. It was strictly forbidden to put frozen feet or hands directly into a strong open fire. Sudden heating of numb flesh caused wild, unbearable pain and could lead to irreversible tissue damage and gangrene. Warming up had to be slow and gradual, and every member of the community knew this first aid. Immediately after everyone had finally woken up, all the beds were immediately folded up or moved aside. This was not done for the sake of visual order or military discipline. The main purpose was to dry the space under the bed, which had been warmed up by the human body during the night. If warm skins were left lying on the ground all day, condensation would inevitably accumulate under them due to the temperature difference. Moisture would soak into the fur, and the next night on such a bed could be fatal. The bed had to breathe and dry during the day in order to warm its owner at night. In the camps, it was common practice to wash in the morning with ice-cold river water or to actively rub oneself with snow up to the waist. To an outside observer, this might seem paradoxical and suicidal in such cold weather. However, brief exposure to the cold triggered a powerful rush of hot blood to the skin. This procedure instantly invigorated and dispelled the remnants of sleep better than any coffee. It was a daily harsh tempering that trained the blood vessels to contract and expand. This habit significantly increased the body's overall resistance to infections and frost. Those who could not warm themselves effectively at night and fell ill became a heavy burden on the entire tribe. A sick hunter lay in fever and could not provide food for his family. A sick woman did not have the strength to tan hides or prepare food, requiring care for herself. Therefore, taking care of one's own warmth and health was considered a direct social responsibility of every adult. Being healthy and strong meant being useful to one's clan. Illness was perceived not as a misfortune, but as the result of personal negligence. Silly mistakes in preparing a place to sleep could lead to severe pneumonia or inflammation of the lungs. These ailments were treated with bitter decoctions of medicinal herbs and exhausting sweat-inducing procedures in special sweat tents. Shamans and healers did everything possible to expel the spirit of the disease from the body. But such treatment was very long, painful, and far from always successful in the wild. Therefore, prevention in the form of a dry and warm bed was considered the best and most reliable medicine. Preventing illness was 100 times easier than treating it. The strict, sometimes cruel discipline of everyday life was the main guarantee of the group's survival. One could not be lazy and fail to replace the damp, dry grass in moccasins with fresh grass. One could not forget to beat the matted fur of the blanket to restore its volume and heat capacity. Laziness in the winter forest killed people much faster and more reliably than hunger or predators. Fatigue whispered that you could give yourself a break, but you couldn't give in to that voice. Self-control was more important than physical strength. Having observed the sad consequences of mistakes for centuries, the Indians constantly improved their survival skills. Every tiny detail of their daily life had been tested and paid for, with thousands of cold nights. In this well-oiled system of life, there was absolutely nothing superfluous. Only what really worked and saved lives remained. This whole complex system of beds and skins had one important nuance. It had to be mobile. The nomadic tribes of the plains constantly moved in pursuit of bison herds. Furniture that could not be carried away was useless. Willow beds were ingenious precisely because of their transportability. The willow mat could be rolled up tightly, and small items could be placed inside. This roll was easily attached to a travois, a sled made of 2 poles, which was pulled by a horse or, in the pre-contact period, a dog. The weight of the dried willow was minimal, which made it possible to transport beds for the entire family. Bison robes were heavier, but they were versatile. During the day, they were thrown over the shoulders or used to cover cargo on the trawls. Not a single gram of weight was wasted. Everything that was used for sleeping had a double or triple purpose on the road. Parfleche bags made of rawhide were used to carry clothes and spare moccasins. They were waterproof and protected dry items from rain and snow during the journey. Arriving at a new place with dry clothes was critical for the first night. Setting up and taking down the sleeping area was practiced to perfection. Women could set up the teepee and make beds in less than an hour after stopping. Everyone knew their job: who chopped branches, who cleared snow, who carried skins. The speed of setting up camp was a matter of safety. If a storm began during the journey, the Indians could quickly build a temporary shelter using travois poles and skins for bedding. Mobility allowed them to carry their home with them. They were never completely defenseless against the elements. Even on military campaigns, when warriors traveled light, they took with them the minimum necessary for insulation from the ground. Often it was just a piece of thick leather or a woven mat. They sacrificed comfort for speed, but never sacrificed the principle of insulation. The transportation system allowed even the elderly and sick to be carried on sleds, wrapped in sleeping skins. This allowed the tribe not to abandon its weak members. Warmth and care traveled with the people. Thus, sleeping technology was inextricably linked to nomadic technology. It was a unified system of adaptation to life on the move. Lightness, durability, and efficiency were the three pillars of Native American design. We have seen that the refusal to sleep on the bare ground was not just superstition, but the result of a deep understanding of nature and physiology. The Indians of the Great Plains developed a comprehensive survival system in which every element, from a willow twig to a bison hide, played a role in preserving life. They fought the cold not with brute force, but with their minds, using the properties of materials and the laws of physics. Their methods, layering, insulation from the ground, use of snow and mutual warming, remain relevant today. Any modern survival expert will confirm that these principles are the basis for survival in a winter forest. The history of indigenous peoples teaches us to pay attention to detail and respect the forces of nature, which do not forgive carelessness. What other forgotten technologies from the past do you think could be useful to us in the modern world? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, telling us which people's way of life you would like to learn more about. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new fascinating dives into the history of survival.